I'm Adrian.
And I'm Marilyn.
Welcome to A Cult of One, a podcast that explores why toxic relationships, groups, or ideologies are so addictive, why they're so pervasive, and what makes anyone susceptible to a cult of one, or many. Today, our guest is the smart and beautiful Miss Maya Nehru. She's a clinical couples therapist based in LA. She specializes in a number of therapies such as depression, anxiety, toxic relationship recovery, trauma therapy, and work-life balance. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from University of Washington, or UW, as us native Washingtonians call it. She received her master's degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy from Pepperdine University. She promotes inclusivity, self-love, and most importantly, her 3 C's: catharsis, clarity, and confidence. She's been featured in Thrive and hosted a frame therapy workshop, which you can check out on frame.com. Thank you so much for blessing us with your presence, Miss Maya. Welcome to Cult of One.
Thank you. So excited.
So excited. We're excited to have you as well. So we want to start off with just talking about your background and why you chose therapy, which is what I want to do in my next life.
Oh, very, very cool. So I actually decided to go into therapy from personal experience. When I was younger, my younger sister had an eating disorder, and seeing her journey with a therapist and, the therapist working with our family as well, it was incredible because she's totally healed now. She worked through it. It was difficult, but going to therapy it got her healthy again. And then when I was 18, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and I started going to that therapist as well, and just dealing with, feeling depressed, being in pain, seeing all my friends live their first year of college and having to stay home and be really sick. It was very hard. There was a lot of hopelessness, and having just that time and space every week to meet with my therapist was incredible for healing, for self-discovery, just like coping all around. So I went to school and I decided I wanted to be a therapist because I've always been a helper and always felt like going into a helping profession was something that would connect with me. So yeah, I still shout out to Crystal, my therapist that I saw for like 16 years.
Crystal
wouldn't be here without her.
Wow. Record.
So just to confirm, you're from Seattle? You're from Washington?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What's your town?
So what's my town? So my whole family lives in like the central district, like downtown in Seattle.
Yeah.
Those aren't the right word, but I live in Kent. That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
That's where I went to Kent High School. Where'd you go to high school?
It was a really small private high school in Redmond. Yeah.
You're from Seattle. Oh my gosh. So what's it like living? So it's just like Seattle and then LA. You didn't go anywhere else between.
Right. I love LA. I moved back to Seattle after I graduated from my master's program in 2018. And 5 months later, I was like, I can't do this. Having been in LA for 3 years, the weather makes such a big difference.
Yeah. Well, now it's expensive in Seattle to live there, like to move back there as an adult. I don't know if I could do it. I mean, I don't want to do it, but
is it just as expensive as LA?
It's close, I think.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So has Redmond also been like built up rapidly? Like,
oh my gosh. It's so different from when I grew up there. It's like apartment buildings everywhere, retail, just the amount of people. It's wild.
I'm glad my parents still live there though, because like that's money. But the thing is, like Seattle itself is expensive. So
yeah.
Anyways, universal basic income for all. So can you go into, it's just great because I have a therapist too. She's a queen. But like you're a young therapist. So are you talking to like young people, millennials? Who's your clientele and what's the issues that you're seeing come up?
Yeah. So I work with mostly millennials. So younger adults, 20s to 30 somethings, a lot of relationship issues that I work with, a lot of anxiety, depression, and trauma. So those are like my main focuses. And that's what I enjoy doing. I've worked with elder adults before, and I've worked with kids too. It's just my preference is this age. And I think, so on the topic of like toxic relationships, a lot of what I've seen, and which is why I chose to kind of focus in it, was that the depression I'm seeing, the anxiety, the lack of self-esteem, like all of that is really stemming from dysfunctional relationships with people that are somewhat abusive, you know, whether it's emotionally, sometimes physically, but at some point in life, a lot of these clients have been close to someone that's really hurt them in ways. And so, I mean, that's really what got me interested in like the toxic relationship piece that I work with.
Because it was so prevalent, you were finding it constantly.
Well, and especially, you're like then seeing it being spread into every other part of their life.
Absolutely.
You know,
like it affects other relationships. It affects how you show up at work, in school, just like everything.
Do you see a pattern in terms of where the toxic relationship is stemming from, whether that be intimate relationships, family, work?
It's really everything. All of the above. Yeah.
Do you find that people who have been in one, like, are they more susceptible to another?
Yeah, I think they can be. And, you know, I've done a lot of reading on the subject too. And one of the things that comes up is that these people who do the abusing, the emotional abusing, these people that have toxic traits have a lot of like personality disorder traits. I'm not saying everyone has a personality disorder, but a lot of traits and characteristics of people that can be diagnosed with personality disorders like sociopathy, narcissist personality disorder. And as someone on the other side of the relationship, so the person being abused, there's a tendency to be like really empathetic and be a people pleaser and a caretaker and someone who has a lot of faith in, you know, other people and wanting to stick it out because you're loyal. So all of these really good attributes that get used against you in situations that turn really toxic, which is sad. And if you don't get the proper help and you don't heal the way you deserve to heal, then you end up falling into a similar pattern with someone else.
It's so upsetting. It's so upsetting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we call our exes dirty boys, and I think it's a form of disassociating from it. What do you think, Maya? You are a therapist, and you have these.
Why do you think it's...
Well, yeah.
I want to know what Maya thinks first.
I was actually going to ask the same question.
Oh, why do I? Because I think it's funny that we just don't use their names anymore. And I mean, obviously, I think it's a protective mechanism. I think that's what it is. And I'm not interested in hearing his name, but I didn't really realize consciously, like, I don't like using his name. I rather call him this, even though I have no, like, ill feelings, you know. I was able to move on from that toxic space. But I think it is interesting that even in our healthy space that we still give it space. Like we still don't call them by their names. Or
do you actively not call Felton?
No, I don't actively, but I think it's just funny because we were able to heal because we constantly talked about it. We were our own form of therapy, which I argue is a necessity for any growth to happen, especially if you're getting out of a cult of one experience, which is you're in a toxic relationship. I mean, that's pretty much the definition of that. So that's what was that? We were asking her a question.
You were asking her, does she think that is disassociating?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think to a degree it can be. I mean, I think names can be very triggering because they represent something much bigger. I think on another side, like sometimes you feel like they don't deserve that, right? They don't deserve you to speak their names. They don't deserve that attention or just that honor from you. And so to label them as something else, it feels safer. It feels better. Like you're doing yourself more of a justice.
Yeah. And that's how I feel when I do it. It's like, like I don't even want to, he gave me no respect for 4 years. I don't want to give you respect by calling you by your name. Oof, facts. You called me out my name. Whoop.
Facts. Absolutely. And I want to go back to when we talked about patterns and you were like, I see patterns in every sphere of people's lives. I mean, their relationship, their work, whatever, their existential crisis. So when it comes to relationships and toxic relationships, particularly when people are coming to you, what's getting them there? Like, because you can stay in a toxic relationship forever. So what is different from these people that your patients that are like, okay, I'm ready?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think it probably differs for people, but something that I see a lot of is like, you're at your wit's end. Like, you know, you don't deserve it. You know your worth, and you're ready to fight for yourself again and put yourself first. And I think that can take a long time. Like you said, sometimes it never happens, depending on what your childhood has been, what your past experiences have been, the type of image you have of yourself and what you deserve out of life. If that's super low and you think this is the best you can do, then there's not going to be any push to change. There's not going to be anything on the other side. Whereas if you have friends and family, a strong support system around you that reminds you every day of your worth outside of the relationship, and you can really relate to that and it resonates with you and you realize the difference, feeling, you know, valued and respected outside of the relationship versus the way you feel in the relationship, I think that really helps spark that fire underneath people and be like, okay, I don't want this piece of my life to feel this bad and dark and shitty, for lack of a better word. Another thing is just anxiety. When the anxiety starts to turn into panic, you know, it gets so severe that the panic attacks start to happen even when things aren't escalating at home or between you and the other person that the toxic relationship creates, like whether it's a romantic relationship at home or even between boss and employee. Once that panic starts to set in and you feel like your nervous system is just on overdrive all the time, I think that gets a lot of people into, because that's scary. That you're already in a situation where you feel like you don't have control. And then on top of that, when you feel like you can't control your own body, like that is terrifying.
Well, I mean, that's a point that, you feel like truly, fully disconnected from yourself. Like there's nothing in me right now that I have any control over. And that's a terrifying wall to hit.
So for people that don't have the coins or see therapy as a negative, literally see that as being weak, what can you do for your friends or your family that you see are in a toxic relationship and they're not reaching out to a therapist or even you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the first thing I would say is always utilize your support system. The best thing you can do is reach out to your friends and family and talk about what's going on, or even in relationships where you actually feel heard, whether it's another coworker maybe, or like a doctor that you feel okay going to. Maybe it's your primary care doctor, but just like talk about it in a way where you know you'll feel heard and that your reality will be validated. Because in these toxic relationships, your reality being invalidated is such a common experience. So using your support system, using the people around you, and also, this sounds a little woo-woo to some people, but journaling. Yeah. So using a journal, even if it's not a journal, just doing what we call a brain dump, where anything that's in your cognition, you just put it on a piece of paper to help you, one, validate your experience in the moment, and two, really help you see what you're living through. You know, one day it could be really good, and then you open up your journal and you see all the trauma and all the shit and all the pain you've been through. Like, no one wants to read that. No one wants to know that they're putting themselves through that. So to have it as a way to kind of keep yourself accountable, I think that's really important. And I see you like nodding.
Yeah, no, because I just know how I was in those situations, which the moment I got through it, I was like, okay, forget about that. Like, even though it was so painful, and the longer I went through it, that pain still kind of started like seeping in even to the good times, to the point of like, I wasn't even happy in the good times because I knew it was going to be bad in a moment. So I was just kind of like on eggshells. So I feel like, yeah, if I had like written that down to like force myself, you know, because I'm deleting the text messages from it. Like I'm like, okay, we're going to set that aside.
Yeah. It didn't happen.
Right.
If I don't have to read about it. Yeah.
What's typically the dynamics you see from like men to women in terms of like the toxicity? If everyone's coming in with that general issue, how is it different from like what are guys saying and what are women saying?
I think from what's being said, it's a lot of just like similar content about feeling devalued, feeling, manipulated and controlled, gaslit, losing your sense of self. In terms of like the perpetrators, there tends to be a greater number of men that I hear about doing the perpetrating. So being the toxic partner in the dyad. But then there's also like moms. I work with a lot of clients whose moms have gone through their own trauma and their own stuff growing up that now they've become super toxic and super controlling and narcissistic in ways that for clients growing up under that sort of authority is really traumatizing. So I think it really it's the whole spectrum. It's just what I'm seeing more of right now is people coming in with men being the toxic users.
And that lines up to what we were reading the other day, which was because, like on Instagram and stuff, I'm trying to like post educational sort of things. And I felt like I was like constantly like putting it on men, like calling men narcissists, doing all that. So I was like, let me look up what a woman is like as a narcissist. And that was like the way that they generally come out is through like a family leader. So a mom or like an aunt or something. So that makes sense. Or
that's interesting. Oh, what a new thought. But it makes sense though, because I mean, you are the god of any kid's life. You want to be with your mom. Love dads. They're real ones. But I mean, there's
the one that's feeding me, helping me, doing all this stuff. Like
I'm coming from her. So we're going to have a closer bond than anybody. I'm sorry. But how, like you were saying, how you can be, you're more susceptible. I mean, that's the most susceptible you can be. You don't even have a choice.
Yeah. And those are, for the mom, she gets you at your most impressionable. Like growing up, those are most formative years, So if what she is doing and saying and how she's treating you is how you end up viewing the world and your self-worth and you internalize it, like that's going to be a lot of trauma that you walk through this world with.
And how do you combat that?
You go to therapy.
And what do you learn in therapy? What's some tips?
That's a loaded question.
Like, you got to pay for that.
You learn all sorts of things in therapy. But I think therapy, like the biggest reason I encourage therapy for people having gone through trauma is because you can't get to a calm, balanced state where your nervous system feels safe all the time unless that's been worked through. Because there's going to be triggers all over the place, right? There's going to be moments where you feel like you can't be grounded in the present because you're so overtaken by everything you've gone through, because our bodies hold on to that. There's no escaping it. And so using therapy as that safe space where you can cry, you can get angry, you can laugh, you can reflect on everything you went through, you can find meaning in it and become a better, healthier version of you. Like, I think we all deserve that.
Yes. At the very basic, minimal level of life.
Yes.
Wow. We should be able to understand ourselves and be able to love ourselves and know what's going on with ourselves.
And also to know that, like, we don't have to recreate patterns that we've been living. Like, say it's a mom and child relationship. A lot of people will feel like, okay, I'm going to end up with my mom. I'm not going to have a family because I don't want to do what happened to me, my kid.
Right.
But that's not always true. And if you work through that trauma and you work on yourself, then you can create your own path.
Well said. So for people out there listening who are like, I don't even know what that looks like. I cannot even comprehend what a healthy me looks like because, like you said, I grew up like this. What are some things that are a common denominator in healthy people that are just like thriving?
Yeah, that's another good question. For me, it's a lot of just self-esteem. You know, feeling good about who you are and what you're doing in this world, and not feeling like you have to take on other people's burdens or other people's expectations. Like, you just live in your own lane. I think another piece of that is ensuring that you're surrounding yourself with people that lift you up. You know, like when we're at our best, I think we're surrounded with people that encourage that and celebrate that. And that's so important, especially nowadays, where like connection online and connection through social platforms and all of that is so easy, but it's also easy to feel disconnected at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because everyone lives online, especially seeing my niece and nephew. I mean, they're babies. Dash is 7, I think. I mean, he lives online. He's a gamer. That's what he's named himself. But I worry. I think, how can you create the type of bonds that like I have with my friends and my family? Because I was around them constantly and the TV was a second thought, or I mean, we couldn't connect like that. So I wonder for that generation, or for people who like exclusively lived online, how can they cultivate those good relationships? And there's definitely like a loneliness epidemic going on. So how are you supposed to cultivate that like online in a meaningful way? Because like you're saying, like social media is such a smoke and mirrors. Like you can feel like I have all these friends, but it's like, but do you know?
Yeah. And I think it really just comes down to taking it offline. You know, phone calls, FaceTimes, once it's allowed. When this pandemic is done, knock on wood, I hope that's soon, meeting up in person. Fingers crossed. So I think just taking it offline is important.
You have all the answers, therapist. Oh my goodness.
You really do. What's it like to be a therapist?
I know.
I love it.
I'm like, do you get surprised by yourself sometimes at the things you say? Like,
you're changing people's lives.
Yeah.
If it's all about, if you're saying that the way to be successful is to look within, find a therapist, or have people that are supportive around you, then you're literally changing people's lives. I mean, that's how I feel about my therapist.
And in that, the world.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that has been my goal since I started, because, you know, there's this idea, so many of us want to change the world and so many of us do. And also for me, that felt like a really big thing to take on. Yeah. So I was like, well, if I can change one person's world,
like
that's enough for me. And that will give me meaning and purpose. And that's why I do this, you know, because therapist changed my world. And I wrote my application to Pepperdine about her, and I like sent it to her, and I was like, I love you so much. Like, so impacted me. And I just think it's a really beautiful thing that's created out of that therapy space and that relationship.
Agreed 1,000,000%. How do you get people? One of my best friends. I want to talk to all the people. How do we talk to people that really see therapy as a negative? Because I really feel it's like you're turning your back on literally the thing that you need. How do you talk? And this really digs into cult of one mentality, I feel, which is that's not an option. Not because there's reason behind it, facts behind it, their personal experience, because they haven't even gone yet. So how do they know it's so bad? It's based off this illusion. Go ahead.
I mean, because I feel like our generation is generally better about talking about like understanding that therapy is good. However, the right before us, that generation, to them, therapy meant you're crazy. So then the kids that are, I guess now our generation, they've latched onto that. So even though there's like everybody saying it's good, I feel like there's still probably a piece of them that's like, but I'm not crazy.
Well, and I wanted to ask you, all the people of color that you see, I know, and specifically my culture, it feels looked down upon, because my personal experience is I never cared, because like you, I went to therapy young. So it was kind of like, this is normal for me. And, you know, I have a very loving family. However, and I still feel like in the Black community, it's looked at with that the type of eyes of you're crazy, you're not mentally stable because you can't handle yourself. I mean, I've been talking to my family more and more. Like I've been recording my aunts, my queen aunts, just to know more about them. And I realized there's so many people that passed away and it's never been talked about because there was no communication, like the function of it was seen as not a necessity, even though we did everything with it. But in terms of talking about hurtful things or things that happened that were bad to the family, it's just not spoken about. Yeah. And a lot of that I feel like comes with, well, there's no therapy. And, you know, beyond the survival aspect of what your mind have to be. But yeah, so how do you talk to those beautiful people out there who I feel want therapy, but in their mind don't feel like they don't deserve it, or it will make them look a bad way, or, you know.
That I feel like every question you ask me, I'm like, that's such a good question. I want to touch on what both of you said, because I think you're both right in that there's this resistance that comes up, whether it's generationally, whether it's culturally. Some people just don't see it as an option. They see it as taboo. It's just it's not a good, positive thing. And unfortunately, to those people, I think you have to really honor that and go with it, because unless someone is really open to therapy and treatment, nothing's going to work. They're not going to get anything out of it. So we can sit here and, you know, write a novel about the benefits of therapy and how it could help them change, transform their lives to be better, happier, healthier. But if that block is there for them, nothing's going to go through. So unfortunately, I think then we have to end up sitting in our own discomfort and frustration that comes up for us, seeing our friends or our loved ones struggling and not taking action to like help themselves.
So so you're telling me, if I heard you right, which was beautifully said, we have to just deal with it. Like, you can't force someone to do anything that they don't want to do.
I think so.
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
kind of the same thing with like.
Sorry,
I was gonna say it's kind of like the same thing as like rehab. Like, you can't just force somebody in.
Yeah,
that of course reminds me of The Office when Michael tries to force Meredith into rehab.
He drags her.
Well, to tie it back to like the cult of one mentality and why we're here, if you see a friend struggling in a relationship that's toxic and it's breaking her, and you try to convince her to leave and all the reasons why she should leave, unless she fully believes it, nothing's going to happen. She's not going to leave. So it really has to be this internal motivator for change that drives someone to utilize that.
Do you also apply the same kind of like, you have to have boundaries and live your life? I added the boundaries part. You have to live your life and, support them when it comes to things not being attached to the truth, facts, their own experience. And I argue, obviously, because I know what it's like to be in a toxic relationship, cult of one experience, where you're not really attached to what's happening to you, because for me, at least, I was being told what was happening to me wasn't. And so, and then you come out of that situation, you come out of that bubble, that isolation, and then you're talking to your friends and you're saying things that are just not true. I mean, I would say things that were just like not true, but wholeheartedly, I believed it. Or felt like he wasn't mean to me, or like, he called me lies. Like, he didn't, but it's just like, and it's a weird state to be in. And I feel like I intimately understand it, but being out of it and watching other people go through it. And this can be, I feel like this also can correlate to Trumpism or anything that has to do with blindly following a leader without critically thinking, or on a basic level, putting yourself first before another human. I don't know if that applies to moms, because moms put their kids first, but whatever. I mean, for real, because I feel like a lot of these things are rooted in putting yourself before another. But how does that not sound selfish? How do you make that sound good, Maya?
It's hard to, right? Self-care isn't selfish all over the place on Instagram right now. And I think that's really hard for people to understand and to internalize. But I like to say, so, I mean, when you go on an airplane, you're going on a trip, and they give that whole safety spiel, and they're like, put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. That's how I view taking care of yourself. And so you need to take care of yourself in the best way that you can before you turn around and take care of anyone else. Because if you are not at your maximum capacity, you're not most patient, you're not most logical, you're not rested, like anything, you're not going to be able to help someone the way they deserve to be helped, because you won't be all of you. So if we look at relationships and situations like that, and we're able to set boundaries to protect our own health and sanity, I think that's what's most important. And then you look to other people, because otherwise you're not doing them justice in helping and supporting them if you're coming from a place of not being fully you and fully just like capable of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
It was funny, like the moment that you started, I was like, this is going to be good.
What people need to hear, yes. Absolutely. What are the steps to creating boundaries? Because I feel like my creating boundaries got better with time after I kept doing it. And like, how do you even start creating safe boundaries for yourself?
You go to therapy. No, I'm kidding.
That's number one.
But also, I think one, you make a good point. Like it does take a lot of practice. And I think there's always room for improvement. Like even sitting here as a therapist, I'm talking about boundaries, and there's like tons of places where I could have stronger, firmer boundaries. One is I recommend really writing down your needs. So writing it on a piece of paper, writing it on your phone, and visualizing, like seeing what you need out of relationships, what you need for you to feel your best, whether it's, you know, a certain type of career that helps you thrive, whether it's certain relationships that you need to cut out because they're too draining. Like write it down. Look at your values. Like, what are you valuing? Is your life, are you living your life aligned with those values? Are there places that you're putting in a lot of time and energy that aren't aligned with your values? And can you cut those out? And then also I'd say just like talk to friends and family. I think conversations around boundaries are just as important as setting boundaries themselves. And you can get a lot of inspiration that way. Like, where do you set boundaries? How did you realize you needed a boundary there? What types of things can I do that could help me when I'm starting out in creating boundaries for myself? And then again, go to therapy.
Are there a lot of resources if you have no money to see like a therapist, or should they go see a counselor if you don't have money, or like what should you do? Because I feel like I know hella people that would go to therapy, but I feel like they don't do it because they automatically like, well, I don't have insurance, or I don't have this or that. It's like, there's got to be something though.
Yeah, there are. And I think it probably differs place to place just in terms of like community resources. There's a great resource called Open Path Collective, which offers low fee therapy between like $30 to $60 per session based on your finances, which I found is really helpful to share with people that can't afford, you know, out of pocket fees. A lot of times if you're in school, there'll be school counselors that you can see for free. So utilize the institution. Sometimes maybe work will have therapists based on their EAPs, or sometimes even like human resources people can be a good place to go and just talk and say, I need direction. This is what's going on. What are my options?
I didn't know you could use HR like that. That's dope.
Yeah,
okay.
me either. Jen, I mean,
that's what they're there for. I mean, yeah, I guess I got all mad. I was like, that's what they're there for. Now I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of getting creative in that way. Google. I think Google is your best friend, right? Just like sort of researching free or low fee options around me. And there should be things.
This is dope because for me, I think there's more options than just therapy. I am a therapy person. That's my home. I'm going nowhere. But for everyone, that, you know, everything can't work for everyone. There's no one size fits all. So thank you, one, for giving those options because they're super, super important, but also life coaches, throwing that out there. But do your research, like you were saying, find what works for you. Because I also find if you're in a toxic relationship, a cult of one mindset, you're not going to go to your friends, maybe, even though that's your safe space, maybe in those turmoil times. Because for me, I didn't talk to my friends when I was in a toxic relationship. So like you were saying, rightfully so, Maya, therapy, that's where you start. Number one, someone to talk to, someone to share that feeling. So those resources. Yeah.
And I think also I want to add, like, if you don't have a lot of resources, or you're looking to use a certain type of financial option, you can always reach out to therapists that are in network with insurance, even if you aren't, or who are only full private fee, and just ask them for help too. And say, like, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have any referrals? And the worst you can get is like one and no response, which really bothers me that people in my industry do that anyways. Just no. right? But like just the other day, I got a referral and I couldn't help them, but I gave them a couple of resources that would work.
Right.
So yeah,
that's a great start for a lot of people.
Suggestion.
I feel like that is almost even like maybe for people who feel like it's going to be difficult to find somebody, like just reach out and be like, this is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Since you're in the industry, like, can you just help me connect with someone that would make sense for me?
Yeah. Just guide me. And I think ethically, like my industry should be doing that all the time.
Right.
You know, whether it's a client that you see right now and you're referring out, or whether it's a stranger that you've never met, but just like anyone in need of help, I want to guide you.
Right.
So like, feel free to reach out. That is my mentality.
So we're coming up on an hour and we respect our guest time. I have one more question, Marilyn, if you have one as well. You on your website, it was very prominent. I don't have my notes up. So you said you were speaking to people of color, essentially. And I thought that was really, really dope because, man, having a Black lady therapist changed my life because I've been in therapy since I was a kid, as I said. So the cultural competency changed the motherfucking game. And I wanted to know why you felt you needed to put that on there, which is dope. Thank you for doing that. What is behind that kind of?
Well, my reason behind that was like people like you, clients like you, right? Who feel like that just adds another sense of safety, another sense of understanding to the therapeutic relationship. And I think that's so important. I feel like everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone has a story that needs to be told. And regardless of your race, ethnicity, you know, sexual orientation, whatever, like I want to be that person for you. And if you relate to me more because you are South Asian or from, you know, India itself, like, yeah, more power to that. Reach out to me, you know, that I get you to your level. So I want to reach as many people as I can. And I think part of that is being as inclusive as I possibly can be as a human, as a therapist, as a partner, you know, just in all ways. That's just how I'm built and wired. And I think especially having lived through this past year with everything going on, I think now more than ever, it's important to speak to those people who really have been spoken for a lot and have had their voices disregarded and erased. And you know, if looking at that on my website makes you feel more comfortable to reach out to get the support that you've never reached out for before, like I hope that speaks to you.
Oh, I'm sure it's speaking to people. People have to be knocking down your door. Like, do you feel like it's been more busy because of the pandemic?
Yes, it has.
I mean, my therapist said the same thing. She's like, pushing people away. And I'm like, fuck.
I mean, it's been a tough year.
And have you been doing it all like via Zoom and stuff? Or are you able to go into your office?
So since March, I've been only virtual. And I will continue to be until things have calmed down and people, including myself, feel safer going to face-to-face sessions. But I'm so thankful to have been able to do what I still do over telehealth. Like it's been huge.
I'm sure. Oof. Yeah. What has that been like? Do you feel like you're able to connect just as well? Or do you think there's like difficulty in doing it all over Zoom?
Yeah, I mean, it's not super difficult. It gets the job done. You know, I'm able to connect and able to do what I need to do and help clients in the way I need to support them. I think it just ends up being more exhausting for everyone involved because there's no actual separation between having that contained therapy space versus the outside world where here you're doing therapy where you work, where you sleep, where you eat, you know? So like that ends up being a little tricky and more, at least for me, tiring to do the work and then to step out and be like, okay, this is where I live. Another thing that gets lost is just body language and that energy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I cannot wait to get back to. But other than that, it's been great.
Good.
That's good.
Oh, you okay? Girl, it took us like 10 minutes to get things going. I do not mind.
Doing this at my sister's apartment. We live down the hall from each other, and she just walked in. So I'm like,
Your eyes, you're so sweet.
I know. It's okay.
Yes. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, thank you.
Gracing us with your presence. You gave us so much good stuff.
I mean, everything you said, I was hanging on to.
Yes. I'm going to listen to this tomorrow on the bus.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I so appreciate you guys reaching out. This was fun.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on Cult of One, Maya.
It did so much.